What's up, guys, and welcome back to Foundations of Faith. If you recall from last week, we talked about why it is so important to ask, seek, and knock. It is so important to ask God to lead us to where we're supposed to be. It is so important to seek God and what He has for us, and it is important to knock on the door of God so that He will answer. And because He will answer for us, and He will guide us to where we are supposed to be. Well, this week, as we continue through the On the Mountaintop series, almost done. We got 4 weeks left after this. But we're going to be talking about the golden rule. The golden rule. So my question for you is, how do you treat others? How do you react when you're wronged? If you're anything like me, well, a little bit before right now, not very well. I don't react well to either of those. And though they both came through following Jesus. So, which we'll get into that in just a second. But as humans, we tend to fight back. We have vengeful hearts. We've talked about that multiple times throughout this series and even in the first series. We have vengeful hearts that seek revenge in different situations, in differing situations. And the truth is that craving revenge sets us up for failure. It sets us up for this idea that, hey, we're going to get back at him and we're going to feel good about it. But in reality, we don't feel good about it at all. We don't feel good about it at all. Because it sets us in a place of discontentment and hatred. We become so blinded by what people have done that we forget our own mission. Our own mission in our lives is to follow Jesus. And Jesus calls us to treat others and everyone, let me emphasize the everyone, with kindness, love, and compassion, among other things. He expects us to not seek revenge because that is not what we are called to. We are not called to seek revenge. We are called to be like Him, and He is not vengeful. God is not vengeful. Jesus is not vengeful. He's loving and compassionate. He calls us to treat others how we want to be treated. So what it says here in Matthew 7, verses 12 through 14, it says this: "So whatever you wish that others would do to you, you do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. Those who find it are few." So, the first thing in here, what we see in that first verse, for this is the law and the prophets, it is the law. It is the law. The idea of treating others how you want to be treated is not new in your life. It's not new in your day-to-day lives. You've heard this for years, whether that be your parents or my favorite example, whenever I was in school. I once had a teacher who had a poster of the golden rule. That's what it's called, and that's what it's called here in the Bible too. I had no idea where that came from. I just thought some behavioral person and psychologist said something like that. But she had this poster of the golden rule on her wall, and I would always look at that and I'm like, where did that even come from? I never understood what was so special about it. I mean, obviously, I want to be treated good, so I tried to treat others good as well. But I never understood what was so special about it, and I didn't understand the root behind it. You see, I would do it, but when others treated me wrong, I would retaliate. I would retaliate back, and I'd be petty about it, or I'd be vengeful about it. I did not understand the extent to which it applied. I thought the golden rule only applied when the person was actually being nice to you as well. And that's something that as I grew up and as I got into the Bible more and as I understood who Jesus was, that I started to understand more and more of what the golden rule truly is. Because the golden rule is so much more than a poster saying, or a poster or a saying in our lives. It is a way of life that Jesus calls us to live by. It is a way of life that Jesus calls us to live by. He calls us to live in His ways and live in His image. Jesus thoroughly despises hatred. That's pretty evident throughout the Bible. He thoroughly despises hatred. He despises hate in general. He wants love. He embodies love. That is who he is. See, so he cannot represent any form of hatred because that is not who he is. That is why he is talking about the golden rule here as well. He is loving. He is a loving God who forgives and redeems no matter what. As long as we follow him, he loves and he redeems us. He loves us anyway, but he redeems us when we follow him. When we understand that the golden rule is a way of life rather than a poster, it becomes our law. It becomes the way of life in which we live. You see, Jesus says in verse 12 that it is the law and the prophets. So it was established a way of life. It was established as a way of life long before Jesus came around. Long before Jesus came around. And it was already known that Jesus would be the perfect embodiment of the golden rule. It was already known in the laws and the prophets that a Messiah was coming. A Messiah was coming, and he would embody this golden rule that was already established. It may not have been called the golden rule back then, but everybody knew, hey, this is this. And a lot of people didn't live by that, obviously. We see multiple times how Jerusalem turned away from God and how Israel turned away from God, and eventually it led to the Assyrian conquest and the Babylonian exile in the prophets and in the history, the late history books of the Bible. So, just a little knowledge nugget for you. I can't speak today, but it was established as a way of life long before Jesus came around. Jesus' example that he set for us whenever he was here on earth and his ministry, as we see throughout the Gospels and the law earlier in the Old Testament, should encourage us to follow the golden rule. It should encourage us to treat others how we want to be treated. We should want to live a life like Jesus. And that life means treating others with the same qualities that Jesus has and that Jesus displayed. That means it does not matter what happened or what beef is behind the scenes. It does not matter how we feel about a certain situation. The love of the Lord should flow through us in our day-to-day lives and in those situations, regardless of what they are. We have to treat others how we want to be treated. We have to treat others with respect, with kindness, with love, because that is what we want. I hope that's what we want. So not only does it allow us to follow the law, but it allows us to follow Jesus, talking about the golden rule. It allows us to know him and his qualities more and more and more. When we submit to the Father, we're able to see the joy that he brings us. We're able to see the joy that he generates in our lives that nothing else can generate for us. We are able to see exactly how he works day in and day out in who we are, in our love, in our joy, in our happiness. See, the joy that we experience from following Jesus and from demonstrating this golden rule, it paves the way for kindness and respect. And in turn, treating others how you want to be treated. Whenever we understand that, hey, kindness and respect go hand in hand with treating others, we start to, gravitate towards that rather than gravitate towards hatred. When we understand that this is what Jesus calls us to do, and we fully submit to the Father, this is what we start to do. We start to love. We start to demonstrate joy. We start to demonstrate kindness. That is exactly how we are supposed to react. When we see the love of the Father, we should desire for everyone to see and feel that love. I don't know about you, but I love the love of the Father. I love feeling like this epitome of love that will never be conquered by any other type of love. And we have to demonstrate that exact love to other people. Now, granted, we won't be as loving as the Father, obviously, but we should desire for everyone to see and feel that love, and we can be representations of that. That is why it is so important to treat others how you want to be treated. When we embody Christ and the call that he has put on our lives, we are able to broadcast that through our actions. We're able to broadcast the love that God has put on us to others. The cup is overflowing. You see, we have to be willing to put our own egos and attitudes aside in order for them to be filled with the Father's. in order for them to be filled with who the Father is, what he has done for us, the provision and the love that he holds, we have to be willing to put our own ego and attitudes aside. And that's something that I struggled with for so long because I was so selfish and I was so self-centered. I had the biggest ego imaginable, and I still have a little bit of it. But we are so focused on our egos and we're so focused on ourselves that we are neglecting to be filled with the Father. And that's what we have to do. That's how we demonstrate the golden rule. That's how it gets put in our lives. The second thing that we see here in verses 13 and 14 is this: enter the narrow gate. Enter the narrow gate. And the truth about it is this: you are not going to run into people who act like this, who act like loving and kind. You might, and you will. You'll run into a few of them, but you are not going to run into the majority of them. A lot of people nowadays are just really rude. A lot of people are. You're going to run into people who embody the complete opposite of what we are called to do. And this is because the people of the world outweigh the people of God. And don't take that the wrong way, obviously, which I'm about to explain. God will always prevail no matter the numbers. No matter the numbers. The world has more people. The world has more people that do not believe in Christ. I think the number is 2.2 billion are Christians, 1.3 are Islamic. There's a whole bunch of numbers, but there's a decent amount of people, probably around a billion, or probably more than a billion. There's a lot that do not know God and that have no clue that, they will not go to heaven. And that's so sad. It's so sad to talk about. And that's another episode that we'll probably have about reaching unchurched people. But the Lord will prevail. But the world has more people, but the Lord has more power. The Lord has the power to demonstrate who he is throughout the entire universe. He created the universe. But there's so many unchurched people in this world. And that is why we see so many people with negative energy. And we see people with negative energy in the churches because they're not letting God fully come into their lives and change it and love. They want to hold on to what they can control and they want to hold on to how they can feel. The world has the greatest influences on our behaviors and our relationships. And if you don't get anything out of this is the biggest truth bomb that you'll ever see. Oftentimes we sit there and we wonder why we're so broken and we're so far and we feel unloved and we feel, upset about stuff. And for me, it realized I'm not following God how I should. I'm letting the world dictate how I am. I'm letting the world dictate who I am. And that's why the world has the greatest influence on our lives. Because we look at the world for validation. We look at the world for egotism. We look at the world for everything. If we see how someone reacts to something, we may adopt that as our own. And the world don't react like the people of God do. The world does not react how people of God do. When others get mad at us, we may get mad at them because that's what we see. The example set by the world is not one of joy, grace, and compassion, but rather it is one of hatred, anger, and bitterness. Nowadays, you don't run into many people who represent the golden rule. Even if they're in church, you don't represent that because we're so clouded by this idea that the world is this, the world is that, politics are this, politics are that. And so we form this division in the middle of I'm here, they're there, we don't get along. When in reality, we're both in the middle and we're trying to seek God. At least one side is. And if you're trying to seek God, you have to demonstrate the golden rule. There is no division when it comes to God. Christ is not divided. Christ is not divided. So, we don't run into very many people who represent the golden rule. It's all about them. It's all about how they feel, what they want to do. They neglect the Lord and they neglect what the Lord calls us to do. They want what they want. And, a lot of times I find myself kind of in the same boat and I'm like, Caleb, what are you doing, dude? Like, what are you doing? You know that this is not what you're supposed to do. Back off. Let God lead you. And most of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't because I think I know what's best for me half the time. So if you're feeling like that, don't feel bad because, I'm the same way. And that's just because we're humans. That's our human nature. Some may not even know what the Lord wants to do because they have not seeked it or they have never had someone tell them. It's that simple, We talked about seeking God last week. But a lot of people don't know the Lord because they've never seeked him or they've never been told to seek them. Or that somebody told them, hey, this is a waste of time. I didn't get what I wanted in the amount of time that I wanted it. So don't go do this. And they listen. And that's where treating others how you want to be treated comes into play, and representing Christ comes into play. You see, we have to be people of Christ who represent Christ. I'm going to say that again, really, really, really important. We have to be people of Christ who represent Christ. Nowadays in the church, what we see people who come here on Sundays and come here on Wednesdays, and they act like they're representing Christ. When they go out into their day-to-day lives, into their jobs or into their schools or into their colleges, we see day in and day out that they treat people like crap. They go in and they spread hatred and they spread lies and they spread misinformation. And those same people will come here on Sunday and act like they are the holiest saint of them all. And that is what we see day in and day out. So if we truly want to see people come to Christ, we have to be people of Christ who represent Christ. We have to lead people to Christ rather than push them away. So our actions in our day-to-day lives have huge implications in the kingdom come. That is exactly what Christ is saying here. That's why the golden rule exists, because we are supposed to follow Christ and we are supposed to represent him. That is how the kingdom grows. So if we are neglecting who Christ is and representing Christ as is, we are never going to see growth because we are pushing them away from who Christ truly is. But we have to be people who want to see others come with us through the narrow gate, not the wide gate that leads to destruction, but the narrow gate that leads to eternity. We have to pour into them so they know who we are, so that they know who Christ is. We have to be people who represent Christ. The more that we love and the more that we treat others with respect, the greater the opportunity for the gospel to be spread. The gospel thrives in places that represent it. It thrives whenever we're talking to people with kindness, joy, respect, with love, with compassion. It thrives. If we are actively representing Christ and what he has done and his ultimate show of mercy, then we are doing just that. We are embodying who he is, and that is our call for our lives. We are letting the gospel show through us and shine through us. And this grants the opportunity for people to see Christ in us and ask questions. Ask, seek, knock, like we talked about last week. It provides this opportunity. The best question that you can ever receive, and I know this from experience, is who is Jesus? And to second that, why are you acting like that? Why are you acting so nice? Why are you acting so joyful? Why are you acting so happy? Why are you acting so loving? But most importantly, who is Jesus? Not only does that give you the time to talk about our Savior, but also about your walk with him. If you recall back at the very first episode of this podcast, the importance of a testimony. One of my favorite episodes I've ever recorded. Our walk with Christ is unique, and our walk with Christ allows us to bring others to Christ because it allows them to see, hey, I may be going through a similar situation, but guess what? I made it through it because I have Christ. You can make it through it because you have Christ. And it can lead to these gospel conversations that lead to the increase in the kingdom and that lead to a salvation for them and that lead to an eternity for them. You walk along the narrow path and through the narrow gate. You see, we have to be people who are willing to answer those questions that no one else will. A lot of people nowadays won't sit down, and I've seen this in different churches, but a lot of people won't sit down and actually have that gospel conversation because they're running late on time or because they have to go eat after service or because of this and that and that. A lot of people don't take time to have those gospel conversations. My personal lead pastor, after every Sunday, he'll sit over here for 45 minutes and talk to people that just walk by. And his whole family's like, can we go eat? I'm ready to go eat Mexican, JB included. But not really. He's just kind of there. But he takes time and he has those gospel conversations, and that's what it takes. It takes answering questions that no one else will to bring people to the kingdom, because the Lord works through us the same way that he works in us. The Lord works through us the same way that he works in us. We talked about it last week, ask, seek, knock. They are asking questions, and maybe they don't know who to ask the questions to. They don't know how to pray. They don't know what that looks like, but they have us. And that is why it is so important to embody who Christ is and to treat others with kindness and respect the same way that we want it, and to follow the golden rule. Because following the golden rule and being open to asking questions and being open to other people, just like God was and just like Jesus was back in his ministry, is how we build and how we increase the kingdom. And if we are so focused on ourselves and we're so focused on our own time limit and our own, oh, it's not convenient for me right now, then we are never going to see growth in our own lives or our church's lives or the kingdom, because we are so focused on ourselves. So guess what? Treat others how you want to be treated. If you're sitting there and you don't know what's going on, if you don't know how the game works, if you don't know what you ordered or you don't know anything like that, if you don't know, you want somebody to explain it. And if you don't know how to talk to Jesus, if you don't know how to pray, you want someone to explain it. So be the people that explain it. Be the people who take time out of their day, who may have been having big plans, who may have huge plans, or may have just, oh, I got to be somewhere at a certain time. Be the people that take the time to follow him and to explain who he is. Because chances are, some people won't. Some people will not explain that. And that is why we see so church decline sometimes, because people don't feel welcome because people aren't willing to answer those questions. Not just the pastor, not just the pastors under the lead pastor, but the church body itself. The church body itself. So be people who are willing to answer those questions. The golden rule is not easy to follow. We talked about this whole episode. It's not easy to follow, especially in this day and age, because it's so easy to act selfish and hateful in the world. And that is why we have to turn to Jesus. The Bible lays out for us exactly how we should be acting towards everyone, not just a select group of people, but towards everyone. It does not change based on the person. And Jesus lays it out in these verses that we are supposed to treat others how we want to be treated. And I hope that is with love and compassion. I hope that is with love and compassion. So do it. Treat others with love and compassion, because that's what Christ would have done. That's what Christ still does. Show them the way to the narrow path rather than the wide path that leads to destruction. You see, the narrow path is the way to eternity. It's the way to prosperity. Nothing else in the world will do. Jesus will. Jesus will. So be people who love people and who bring people to Christ rather than push them away. Be people who love people rather than hate people. Be people who demonstrate the love of Christ. Even when you're mad or upset. Even when you've had a bad day. Even when you've been working for the last 12 hours. Even when you're so stressed out about work or so stressed out about school or anything, be the people who represent Christ. Be people who love people and follow the example that Jesus has paved for us through his own actions and through his own sacrifice, because Jesus is the way and Jesus is the life, and Jesus embodies the golden rule, so should we. We should love others and we should treat others how we want to be treated, because that is what Christ has called us to do. But thank you guys for listening and watching. Like I said, we've got 4 episodes left of the On the Mountaintop series, and then we'll may have another series or not. I don't know. You never know. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Peace.